Today we will be reviewing the Lionel LionChief Plus Santa Fe Hudson. So before we go talking about this product, let's talk a little bit about LionChief. LionChief is Lionel's new product system that acts as a step in between the standard conventional transform sets and legacy. So how they do this is there is a specific remote for each locomotive, and this allows you to get your basic legacy functions or command functions. So on here we have our forward, our reverse, whistle, electric coupler, crew talk, and bell. So instead of having a radio signal sent out through the rail, this remote is paired specifically with this locomotive. Now, one thing to note is if we happen to have two Santa Fe 3450s, they will both respond to the same remote. So this does not mean that you can't run more than one locomotive. It just simply means you can't have two of the same road number. So if we have this Santa Fe Hudson and another Hudson or LionChief Pacific, we can still run those with their each individual LionChief Plus remotes. But that also allows us to also run legacy engines on the same track with a full 18-volt AC track power to the track. These locomotives can also run on 18 volts DC if you so wish, but do keep in mind that the other legacy locomotives do not run on DC. They are strictly AC. So this product is a LionChief Plus item, and the Plus means that this is a separately sold locomotive. It doesn't come in a set or anything. And really the biggest catch with those is this is a full die-cast metal body, tender and trucks, along with the boiler, along with a fan-driven smoke unit like the other command control locomotives, and electrocouplers. So this product also has a kind of a semi-wired tether in between the locomotive and the tender. It has rail sounds, so not quite as extensive as the Lionel Legacy rail sounds, but it is a step up from the classic rail sounds you'll find in your conventional locomotives, along with your adjustable volume and a flickering firebox inside the cab. The minimum curve for all of these Hudsons are 0.31, so it's very friendly to smaller layouts. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this locomotive. So as we look at the front of this locomotive, you can tell right off the bat that this is obviously not one of the higher end models from Lionel, but more like a semi-scale or 027 locomotive. So with that, we have our basically cast in details all along the boiler. So up here on the front, we have our nice small little cow catcher, along with some air pumps. Up here we have a operating headlight, some marker lights that are just glued in, along with a bunch of molded in rivet detail. The handrails, on the other hand, are separately applied. So now let's look up at the top of this locomotive. Up here we have a molded in superheater up here. Moving back, we have a funnel for the smokestack. Underneath that, we have a fan-driven smoke unit, and as usual, if you would like to add smoke fluid to the smoke unit, you pour smoke fluid directly down the stack. Behind that, we have this bell that is swinging. Further behind that, we have a nice cast-in sand dome, along with a nice crisp 3450 along the side of it. Moving further back, we now have a steam dome along with a nice little whistle back here. Moving further back, we have some pop-off valves, and on top of the cab we have some cast-in rivets along with some cast-in vents for the roof. Now looking at the side of this locomotive, up at the front here, again we have our general cast-in details along the side of this boiler. Up here we have where normally a detailed builder's plate you would see on a high-end Lionel model, we now see a classic built by Lionel, kind of like their post-war locomotives. So moving below that, we have a nice looking steam chest along with some nice pilot trucks under that. Moving back, we have our cast-in throttle linkage and whatnot on the side of the boiler. Under that, we have a classic walkway along with some nice running gear that looks wonderful when the locomotive is in operation. On that running gear, we have these beautiful spoke drivers along with white walls painted on the drivers. We have on the side of the boiler along with the cast-in details the separately applied handrail. Moving back towards the firebox and the cab, on the firebox it's painted a nice gray and has a number of cast-in details on it. On the cab we have a nice crisp AT and SF on it, along with a number of cast-in rivets. Below the firebox we also have our nice cast-in trailing truck. So now let's take a peek inside the cab. Inside here we have actually a very nicely detailed back head of the boiler with, again, cast-in details, but it's still very nice to see. On the inside here we have our hand-painted fireman figure and engineer figure, and then we have a flickering firebox inside the cab. Also under that we also have our semi-tethered drawbar here, and we'll take another closer look at that here in a moment. So now let's take a look at this semi-tethered drawbar that Lionel's created for these locomotives. So as you saw, here is the engine side of this drawbar, and here is your tender side of the drawbar. And what we have here is there's 4 contacts on the inside of this tender, or engine, anyway. And this drops right inside the tenders, which also has sprung contacts. So to do this, all we have to do is lift up the locomotive and drop that right in, and of course try to make sure our wheels are right on that and give it a good pop up, and we're connected. And that holds the tender along with the rest of your train and provides your electricity to the electronics for the sound system inside the tender. So now let's take a quick look at the front of this tender. So here's the receiving end of that drawbar that we took a look at a moment ago. And this tender is completely die cast. So it has a very nice weight to it. It's not plastic, it has a very nice weight to it. But anyway, moving in, we have a bunch of cast-in rivets, a little cast-in pile of coal there, and some coal doors. So looking at the top of this tender, again, keep in mind this is all metal, so we have our cast-in coal load here that is completely metal. Kind of blends in with our tender here, but you can still kind of see the molds in the coal there. On the back of this tender we have a nice little cast-in water hatch, along with this little piece here, along with the handrail. So looking at the side of our tender here, we kind of have the same story again. We have our metal side of our tender along with some cast-in rivets along the side here. Along on the side of this tender we have our nice crisp Santa Fe 3450. Under that we have some 6-wheel trucks that are decently detailed for this model. So let's take a quick look at the back of this tender. Again, here's our cast-in rivets along with this little cast-in ladder. We have a nice crisp 3450, and down here we have some legible numbers here that says 1,800 gallons and 18 tons. So we have a little just glued in piece for the backlight. It doesn't actually light up. Same story with our 2 marker lights back here. They're just kind of glued in. But we do have an electrocoupler that can be fired from the LineChief Plus remote. So before we go ahead and take this engine up for a run around this layout here, we're going to go through the operating process of the LionChief system. So let me bring up power here. Now that we have power, you'll notice that the engine started to beep at us. And how to fix that is this LionChief Plus remote has a switch on this side. If we turn this on, this turns on the sounds of the engine. So, let me go ahead and shut track power off here again so you can hear me. Alright, now that you can hear me here, we have the remote on. Keep in mind I did just shut off track power, so the engine's not going to actually do anything at this point in time. But as we move this knob forward, that red LED up there starts to blink. And we can turn it up and then it'll start blinking faster. So it's kind of a speed indicator for you. We'll move it back down to 0. Once we're back there at 0, it comes back on solid. Down here we have our whistle, crew talk, and bell buttons. A double tap of the whistle really quick will throw our electric coupler. Or we can go ahead and just have our regular whistle. Here we just have our regular crew announcements that we will go through here when we start this engine up again. And we have our bell button. This would also throw a front coupler on the locomotive if it was a diesel or had an electric coupler on the front of the locomotive with a double tap. Alright, now that we've gone through the startup process, let's go ahead and get this engine ready to go and take it for a loop around the layout. Alright, before we go ahead and move this engine on out, let's take a quick listen to the whistle. And the bell. And this crew dialogue is basically a shortened version of that generic stuff Lionel uses in their legacy locomotives. So let's take a quick listen at that.
This is the dispatcher. You're cleared outbound. Over. Roger that. Got your signal. Out. This is the dispatcher. You're cleared outbound. Over. Roger that. Got your signal. Out.
Alright, now that we got clearance outbound, let's take this engine for a loop around the layout. So, as you've already probably noticed, we're not at our normal location. We are currently at the 22nd Annual Wichita Toy Train Club Model Train Show and Swap Meet. Here we have our modular layout we take out on shows, along with a G-gauge layout, NATIO layout, And further in the back of this room, we have an in-scale layout. So this concludes the review of this Lionel LionChief Plus 3450 Hudson. Thank you for watching. Please follow us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube.